I'm a senior researcher in algal biotechnology here in Scotland. I'm also an editor for Journal of Applied Phycology, and I'm a proud member of the EU coast group called Ocean for Biotech. So what I'm gonna start doing here is I can start sharing my presentation. So the topics I want to discuss, and if I just stop talking, it's because I'm letting people to join us. So when yes, okay, good. So the topics we're going to cover today are the Convention on Biological Diversity, access and benefit sharing, Nagoya Protocol, which is this is the main course of this talk. We're going to look at some regulations and enforcement, and also the ABS clearinghouse, which is the main tool that you can use on your own. And hopefully we're going to look at some questions and answers as well. So I want to share with you, well, if I can. Oh, there it goes. I made this cartoon in the first lockdown, and you know, if you look at it, it's very straightforward. You cannot just take what you want. But what I'm hoping is that at the end of this talk, you'll recognize what is wrong with this picture, and not only what is wrong, but how you can make it better and follow the Nagoya Protocol. So the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, and I'll be saying this a lot, so Convention on Biological Diversity, is a United Nations platform. It's an international instrument, so it has multiple countries involving in it, and it is focusing on biological diversity. And we have, as humans, realized that biological diversity is what is keeping us alive, right? It feeds us, it provides medicine, it's something we need to take care, and going into the future is to treat it in sustainable and responsible way. So CBD recognized this and established three main objectives. The one is to conserve biological diversity, right? That makes sense. We need to preserve it into the future, but we also need to use it sustainably. So that's the objective 2. And finally, objective 3, which please keep this one in mind because it will come back. The third objective of CBD is the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. So how do we share these resources fairly and equitably? Sorry, I'm admitting more people in. You can probably figure out by now, I love cartoons. So all these cartoons are from CBD website, and the one on the right kind of demonstrate that's the threat to biodiversity. Okay, so I keep talking about genetic resources. Well, what are genetic resources? You know, these are plants, animals. A lot of people ask me, are bacteria and viruses involved? Yes, absolutely. They're also considered genetic resource. Anything living, anything that carries genetic material that could be potentially used for human needs. And these resources can be taken from the wild, or they can be cultivated, domesticated. And again, why do we care? Well, we care because our lives literally depend on it, right? So we use genetic resources for everything in our lives. And I show you here 6 examples, and I'm sure you can come up with tons of more. So we use genetic resources for food and feed, for biotechnology, pharmaceutical application, animal plant breeding, cosmetics, and many, many more. So the question is, who owns these genetic resources? If I would look out of the window here in Scotland into one of the lochs in one of the lakes and found alga that produces anti-cancer properties, who owns that resource? So here's a quote directly from the CBD where it states that it's the countries, it's the states that have the sovereign rights to not only exploit these resources, but they also have responsibility to use them sustainably, and they also have jurisdiction and responsibility for regulating these resources as well. So it's the countries that own these genetic resources. And as you can imagine, there are several issues with genetic resources. The first one is, well, of course, they're not evenly distributed. And if you live in Luxembourg versus if you are lucky enough to live in Brazil, in Amazon, you can imagine the amount of genetic resources, the biodiversity is very different. So genetic resources are not evenly distributed. Also, we need to make sure that we're using them in a sustainable way, and we need to preserve these balanced ecosystems. So it's not only about using them, but also taking care of them. And lastly, and this is a big topic, a lot of countries felt like they're being exploited, that there is some big corporation from somewhere else comes and it's called biopiracy, where they basically take genetic resources away from them and they don't get any benefit from them. So these countries felt like it's not really fair how some other countries can come in. So to avoid all of that and to keep the sharing fair, that gave a rise to access and benefit sharing provisions. So these are the provisions that control the physical access to genetic resources, and they also sort of monitor and manage the benefits coming out of them. So that's the access and benefit sharing. And how does it work? Well, I mean, if you look at this cartoon here, you can see, we have the genetic resource and possibly traditional knowledge associated with the genetic resource. And you have the providers, which is the country that owns these genetic resources, and we have the users that want to use them. So access and benefit sharing works on this whole scale, and we use ABS using prior informed consent, or PIC, and mutually agreed terms, or MET. So I'll tell you more about these. So PIC, that is the permission given by competent national authority. So if you would think of your country as your house, and someone would say, oh, well, I'm gonna go to your house and grab something. Of course you would say, well, wait a minute, do I agree with it? You need my prior consent to do it. So that's what prior informed consent is. And also it needs to be issued by someone with authority. It cannot be my cousin telling you that it's okay to come to Scotland. It has to be a competent national authority issuing this consent. And then mutually agreed terms, or MAT, that is the agreement that actually addresses the relationship between the providers and users. What are the benefits and conditions of this exchange? And this can be either using money or a variety of other non-money related services. So what I'm hopefully gonna do here is play you a movie, and let's hope this works.
Since the beginning of humankind, we have been taking advantage of what Mother Nature provides for us. From using animals, cereals, and plants, to discovering the first antibiotic, we have come a long way. We know our world is rich. Animals, plants, and microorganisms contain billions of useful genetic resources. Some are already widely known, and many of them are being used to produce medicine, food, cosmetics, and other important things. But a huge part of what nature holds for us still remains undiscovered. Take a plant, for example, deeply hidden in the rainforest. Only the local people may be aware of what the plant can be used for. Yet, its genetic composition could be useful to millions of people all over our planet. Sharing and using the world's genetic resources is important for the progress of humankind. This is why we need internationally agreed terms for ABS, access and benefit sharing, with regard to genetic resources. How to access genetic resources and share the benefits between those who use them and those who provide them in a fair and equitable way is illustrated in ABS Simply Explained. Every country holds rights over animals, plants, and genetic resources found within its borders. Anyone from another country who wants to use such resources must respect these sovereign rights. That was agreed upon by 172 countries at the UN Rio Summit in 1992, when the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, was born. The Convention on Biological Diversity and its Bonn Guidelines define the ABS principles. An interested foreign researcher or company may only access a genetic resource if allowed by the providing country. This also includes traditional knowledge that is associated with the genetic resource, because traditional knowledge held by indigenous and local communities often plays an important role in the discovery of new active ingredients in genetic resources. In accordance with national legislation, a PIC, a prior informed consent, needs to be obtained from the providing country. The PIC request should outline the nature and the intended goal of the planned research and utilization. The MAT, the mutually agreed terms, will then define the benefits for the provider of the genetic resource as well as further contractual issues. These benefits could be monetary, such as a lump sum payment or a share of the profit, or non-monetary, such as a transfer of knowledge, technology, or training. These rules apply to commercial users and, on the basis of special considerations, also to non-commercial users. The idea behind this concept is to help conserve our biodiversity by sharing the benefits from its utilization in a fair and equitable way. In 2010, the Nagoya Protocol fleshed out and specified the access and benefit sharing principles of the CBD for countries providing and using genetic resources in a legally binding way. All the concepts explained so far are now part of the protocol. The protocol is to enhance legal certainty for all parties involved in the utilization of genetic resources. And another important element was added to the protocol. Official checkpoints now have to be designated in countries where genetic resources are being utilized. Along the research and development chain, these checkpoints will help verify whether PIC has been obtained and MAT have been established. The collected information will then be sent to a specific public database where it can be reviewed by the country that has provided access to the resource. This procedure allows for the tracking of a genetic resource from provider to user all the way to innovation and potential commercialization. This helps to ensure fair share.
Sorry, I was admitting someone into the room and I stopped the video. But I think we got the main
sharing
points.
Of benefits if a product based on a genetic resource is introduced to the market. Now, all ratifying countries need to translate the provisions of the Nagoya Protocol into domestic laws or regulations that reflect the interests of all stakeholders concerned. ABS, implemented properly, holds great potential for multiple benefits for users, providers, and for the conservation of nature.
Okay, perfect. I should mention that this is definitely not my video and it has been commissioned by German government. Okay, so this is just a timeline of CBD and ABS, and what I want to show you, I know you have seen most of it in the video, but what I want to highlight is how long this can take, right? So we're starting in 1992 in Rio when we are collecting signature for this idea that has been widely accepted. And then there is these world summits and ad hoc groups and sort of special day meetings and all of that leading to the Nagoya Protocol in 2010. So there's basically 20 years of work to even make it, to put it together. So Nagoya Protocol, so this is the exciting part. This is the main course of this talk. So what is Nagoya Protocol? So that is it is a protocol on access to genetic resources and fair and equitable sharing. So that ties again back to the CBD Objective 3, Nagoya Protocol has been adopted in 2010, but it didn't come into force until 2014. The main objective, again, is to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So it contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. I should point out that because it was adopted in 2010 and now we're in 2020, you can think of it that Nagoya is 10 years old, so this is the 10th birthday. CBD, if you visit their website, they have these celebrations, so there's a whole program how to celebrate this birthday of Nagoya Protocol. If you know, and I know these documents, it sounds somewhat sleepy, but Nagoya Protocol itself, it's relatively short if that's how you're judging a quality of documents. So it's 25 pages, 36 articles, and you can easily read it. It's very approachable, and it's also translated to a variety of languages, all the main languages you can think of, but also there are courtesy translations to less common languages. There's anything from Nepali to Polish, and some languages I don't even know where they're from. So what Nagoya Protocol does, again, it advances that third objective of CBD, and it introduces clarity and transparency and legal certainty. That's a very important term, legal certainty, into the process of sharing. So I just want to highlight some of the points that are mentioned in the Nagoya Protocol. So in terms of access obligation. So Nagoya Protocol, it's in the name, it's a protocol. It shows you if the country ratified Nagoya Protocol, it agreed legally to follow these rules, these terms, how to do this. So for the access obligations, it provides rules and procedures. Again, it pushes the PIC, the prior consent, and the mutually agreed terms, the MAT. It also issues the permit. This is really important. So it's not only how you apply and how you follow it, but it also recognizes who is the agency issuing this permit to you. And again, it's trying to promote and encourage research and contribute to biodiversity in a sustainable way. And we all know that this is all about to sort of highlight the importance of genetic resources and for our life, for our survival. Yeah, I just want to highlight the mutually agreed terms again, and I'll show you later on actual example from real life. But you know, as we saw in the video, it can be either money or it's everything but money. So in terms of the money, I'm listing you a few examples. So it can be anything from fees, you know, upfront payments. It can be milestone payments, royalties. It's very popular. License fees. You can pay the actual people like salaries. You can fund research. You can start a company and joint ventures. So and these are just examples. The Nagoya Protocol does not limit to only these. And then, of course, the non-monetary benefits are even more diverse. So it could be anything from sharing research, collaborating with partners, participation in product development. And this is really important. So if you are in a country where you really appreciate someone's coming in, you have to know your rights and you need to know what you want to get out of it, so to speak. So it could be anything as access to facilities, it could be technology transfer, training opportunities, publications, some even social recognitions, but very importantly, intellectual property rights are also on the table for that. So intellectual property rights, IPR, could be in the mutually agreed terms, and oftentimes they are. So Nagoya Protocol obviously not only tells you this is what you should do, but it also tells you how you should do it with the legal certainty. So in terms of the implementation, Nagoya Protocol established national focal points, and these are sort of a contact within the country that should help you with the process and ensure that everything is correct. These national focal points are oftentimes part of the competent national authorities, or CNAs. And I know I'm just chucking acronym after you, but that's what Nagoya Protocol is. So these national focal points and competent national authorities, they provide the information, they grant the permits and the issues, and they make sure that the whole process is working as it should with legal certainty. The Access and Benefit Sharing Clearinghouse, and I will show you at the end the website. That is the database, that's the hub, that's the nest, that's where all the information is being shared, and it's for both users and providers. And you can find everything on that website, from what are the ABS requirements, who are the national focal points, who to contact, what other provisions they have in place. So that's an excellent resource, but again, it is mandatory by Nagoya Protocol that this database is in place. Nagoya Protocol also cares about the capacity building, and we need to make sure we actually develop the ABS legislation and regulation within the country itself. It helps you negotiate the mutually agreed terms, and again, it sort of encourages research within the country. It raises awareness, focuses on technology transfer, and there are some even initiatives to help you how to fund all the finances surrounding Nagoya Protocol. So in enforcement, so if you would think, well, who is in charge here? Well, it is the national governments, and it's the national legislation. So once you ratify Nagoya Protocol, you commit to enforcing it as well. Tricky question, did all the countries ratify Nagoya Protocol? I was hoping for a chat on the side, but the last thing I need is more things to distract me here. But the answer is no. So not all the countries. There are currently 127 parties to Nagoya Protocol, and I'll show you at the end on the website as well. There are 71 non-parties like USA, Australia, Canada, and there is one country that ratified, but it didn't come into force yet, and that is Montenegro. And funnily enough, on the website, it says that it should come into force November 12th, 2020. So in a couple of days, let's see if that one orange country on the map turns into purple. In the EU, we also have additional legislation. So if you find yourself in the EU, there are 2 additional regulations that support Nagoya Protocol. One is sort of focusing on compliance measures, and the other one is looking more on the implementation. But it also has a sort of clarification on how culture collections should be working with Nagoya Protocol. Here in the UK, the national authority on Nagoya Protocol is the Office for Product Safety and Standards. So this will be different in each country, but in the UK where I am, these are the people that are happy, lovely people, very well educated, respond very quickly, but they have another task on their hand, and that is Brexit. So after Brexit happens, if it happens, UK will remain party to Nagoya Protocol, but all the procedures between EU and UK will change, and they will no longer be recognized in the UK. They will be replaced by something we suspect that's very similar, so it's not going to be just everything will be erased. But sadly, after Brexit, the regulations will change between UK and Europe. Let me admit one more person. So there's some activities that are not in scope by Nagoya Protocol, so that means they're not covered by them. And the first one is sort of time related, because Nagoya Protocol came into force in 2014. Anything prior to that is not in scope. So for us, for example, as a culture collection, if we have strains in our cultural library that are prior to 2014, we don't have to worry about anything. So that is the cutoff line, is 2014. Also, if there are genetic resources that have been accessed for taxonomic or descriptive purposes only, if I would like to go to Madagascar and describe a new species of algae, I still need the consent to access it, but in terms of I am not commercially benefiting from it, or I'm not exploiting that, I'm simply describing it. And similarly, I will talk about it later during the culture collection a bit, just purely maintaining, storing cultures, for example, for someone, again, you are not exploiting that culture. Also, I want to show you 3 examples where Nagoya Protocol does not apply, and these are special circumstances. And it's not because Nagoya Protocol doesn't care about these topics, it's because they're covered by some other treaty, international treaty. So the first one I want to mention is the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. It's a very long name, but basically we all recognize that there are some resources that we have to share, and there is no country that would be sustainable only with the resources there. So there are 64 crops and other materials that can be shared, and these are covered by a different treaty. So it's not Nagoya Protocol, they're still covered, but not by Nagoya Protocol. Similarly, the pandemic influenza preparedness framework. Well, how relatable it is these days. Again, this is a very important framework, but it is covered by other ABS treaty, not Nagoya Protocol. And similarly, because Nagoya Protocol covers only countries that have sovereign rights, but how about the areas where are not countries, like Arctic or high sea? When again, these areas are covered by different treaty, not by Nagoya Protocol. And also human genetic resources are not covered by Nagoya Protocol. So into the culture collection. So here in Scotland, we have a beautiful culture collection of algae and protozoa. So what do we have to do in terms of Nagoya Protocol? So again, any strains, any deposits to our collections that came prior to 2014, we don't have to worry about it. For anything else that came either on 12th of October, I know it's very specific, it's either on 12th of October or after, we have to have all the documentation that I mentioned. So we have the PIC, we have the MAT, or there's another document, it's called Internationally Recognized Certificate of Compliance, or IRCC, which combines the PIC and MAT, and it's another sort of form to present the same data. So I want to show you this internationally recognized certificate of compliance. It is not from our collection. This is an example from the ABS clearinghouse, but it is from India, and it has the PIC. But I want to show you the example of MAT. So this is the example of the mutually agreed terms. So in this document, it says, and you can read the details, which is a very broad summary. So it says the user should notify NBA, which is not a basketball thing. In this case, it was in India, and it was the National Biodiversity Authority. Within 60 days, if there are any intellectual property rights established. Also, if the user himself or herself commercializes the process or the product, they want a cut from the benefit from it. So you can see that these MAT agreements can be very different. So in this example, they would want intellectual property rights, they would like a cut from a benefit. In other MATs, they just want to say, if it's for research, we don't care as much, but if you're gonna commercially benefit, we want some benefit from it as well. So again, going back to our culture collection here in Scotland, we don't go out and seek and collect any isolates. The only new additions we have after 2014 came from a project called Genealg, and for this project we store and archive these strains. If we were to sell it, we do it only if we have the PIC and MAT or the internationally recognized certificate. And then the purchaser, whoever buys these cultures, will need to renegotiate the mat. And this is something that was bothering me at the beginning. Oh my goodness, we still have people coming. Is if you are a user, perhaps you were not the one who negotiated the mutual agreed terms in the first place. In which case, you can always revisit that, and you have to legally make sure that the use, your intended use matches what is in the mat agreement, right? So I cannot go out and say, oh, I just want to describe this beautiful algal species, and meanwhile take it to the lab and exploit it for anti-cancer treatment. If that would be the case, I would have to go back to the national focal point and renegotiate a new mat where I would state that. And that's why the mats are usually very broad and general. They don't focus on one single aspect. They try to be more broad, so there is not that back and forth. Culture collections can also apply for registered collections status, which is something that should expedite the process, and it makes it easier for culture collections to be talking to each other. For us, since we're in this UK Brexit mess, we'll do all of that afterwards, so we know how to work with the European collections, and we can also apply it for registered collection status. So sort of starting to summarize, how does the process work and what are the challenges? So in terms of the process, first you do your homework. You know what kind of genetic resource you want, you know where to get it. Well, obviously if you're getting it now, it's after 2014. If it was acquired prior to 2014, you're out of scope, you don't have to worry about it. And you also need to know what is the intended use. So once you know all that, you can do your due diligence, which means you research and you know what are the access requirements. And this is really important, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Just because countries didn't ratify Nagoya Protocol, it doesn't mean that they don't have ABS in place. They still have rules and regulations about how they want to share. It's just not via Nagoya Protocol. So very rarely you can just go to another country and collect whatever you want. Even though if it's not covered by Nagoya Protocol, it will be covered by a different ABS provision. If it is, however, Nagoya Protocol, you know what to do. You need your prior consent, you need to agree the terms, or you can go in the big certificate that lumps it all together. And then you are granted access. And what's really important, the documentation, the paperwork, it is advised that that is kept for up to 20 years. So even 15 years from now, someone can ask you, how did you access this and that? So it's very important to document this due diligence of what you did, who did you talk to, who granted you the access. So what are the challenges? Well, as you can imagine, the awareness and education, so knowing your rights. So, you know, if you're, and we always think of, you know, some beautiful tropical island where bad people come and take their stuff, but we have colleagues in Malta that do regular sampling for another country in Europe, and they say, well, we never even thought of asking for any benefits. And of course, you know, so knowing your rights is really important. The education, right? So you have your national focal points, your competent national authority. Here in the UK, they're very active and they have webinars and all that, but spreading the knowledge. Similarly, journals and funding agencies started to require sort of declaration that you comply with Nagoya Protocol, which will again drive researchers to think about it ahead of time, which is so important. And also, you know, the work that Michelle and everyone basically in this webinar are trying to do is, again, to educate how to do it properly and legally. It's also very important. So when you're writing a new proposal or, you know, request for funding, it's very important that you recognize that this process will take some time, which will cost you money, more or less, either in time or in other sort of services. So because it takes a long time, and as you can imagine, if someone would come to you, and it will not be you specifically as the researcher, but it will be the competent national authority negotiating these terms. But you know, this can go back and forth. There are a lot of drafts, a lot of variations. Now, for example, during this horrible pandemic, people are not in the office. So the time allocation is very important, that you think of it before you start doing all of this. We had some, not complaints, but some concerns about that the access to national focal points is not very straightforward. And there are some countries that are right on the ball and they respond very, very quickly. And there are some countries that are perhaps harder to reach. And for that, it's absolutely critical that you do reach them. And we had some colleagues that were quite sneaky about it, and they tried to approach a similar person that worked in a similar department, but not quite the national. And anyways, it's critical that you document all the due diligence you have done. And also, if you do not obtain the prior consent, you should not proceed. And again, I would go back to the analogy of your house. If you don't give anyone permit to come to your house, how would you feel if they just show up anyways and say, oh, I'll email you later? No, like this needs to be done prior, otherwise it's not legal. Okay, so now we're coming towards the end. So I want to share with you the access and benefit sharing clearinghouse. So for those of you who are online and have the willingness, if you can go to this website. So you can either type in your research engine, access and benefit ABS clearinghouse, and it will pop up, or you can try to type in this address. But again, ABS clearinghouse is a fantastic tool. It's the platform. You can immediately see this big green, as I mentioned, you have the 127 parties that are in, that one orange Montenegro there in Europe, and the black ones are not party. But this, again, it's a hub, it's a database. It shows you all the information going in and coming out, and it should provide you with clarity and transparency. So what I was hoping we would do is that I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to try to answer it. So the first one is Brazil. So is Brazil party to the Nagoya Protocol? And I cannot see the chat, Michelle, so I'm just gonna guess that someone answered it correctly. And just looking at the map, right, you can probably see, no, Brazil is not. But what it allows you to do is when you click on Brazil, it brings up all sorts of very useful information. So if I would ask you, who is the national focal point? As you're in that Brazil website, you can scroll to it and you can find a name, which I'm just gonna tell you, and hopefully some of you have found the same name. It also shows you the agency or institution that this person represents, which again can help you. If you cannot reach the specific person, you can try to reach someone within that department who will then tell you, Luciana is ill at the moment, she'll be back next week. And finally, what are the regulations? So yes, Brazil is not party to the Nagoya Protocol, but of course they control their access and benefits. So their ABS provisions, which is something, again, you should find as you're on this website, is they have their own Brazilian biodiversity law, and they have some material transfer agreements as well. So hopefully everyone found this okay. So we'll do one more example. And we'll do Madagascar, right? Fantastic. Is Madagascar part to Nagoya Protocol? So this is where, if your geography is somewhat wobbly, you're not sure you can actually click on it on the map. There's also a pull-down menu on the top, so where you get countries' profiles, and it's in alphabetical order. So you either click on Madagascar on the map, or you can see from the pull-down menu. And of course, Madagascar is. And again, I'm just trying to highlight that there are all sorts of different information in this ABS clearinghouse. And one of them is, if I would be interested in, oh, is there a national database in Madagascar? Is there something I can look at? I can go to the ABS clearinghouse and see, of course it is. You know, fantastic. It leads you to the website. It has all these great resources that you can visit. So I would recommend you to read Nagoya Protocol, because it's short and sweet, and visit the ABS clearinghouse for any additional information. So in summary, I chucked a good 10 acronyms at you, and I'm hoping as you're looking at them that some of them kind of stuck, and you would be able to follow what they are and why they're important. And again, going back to our cartoon here, is this gentleman is clearly from a different country. His intent is commercial application, and hopefully you would be able to advise him what he has to do to comply with Nagoya Protocol. And finally, as Michelle said, this was just a tease. This was just a theoretical tease, but we are organizing, and Michelle is leading the effort, training on Nagoya Protocol, and it will be truly training with hands-on. It will have the national focal points and competent national authority visitors, and they will tell us sort of their experiences and specific case examples. If you are trying to apply to sample in Italy, Italy is not part of Nagoya Protocol. What do you do if you go to UK? If you go to, so it will be very specific, hands-on, and I'm really looking forward to it. So save the date, and Michelle will let you know when it's actually happening. So with that, I'm gonna ask if there are any questions.